Good evening. It is 6:02. I'm going to begin our meeting since we have such a lot to cover in just 2 hours. Let's see. I want to welcome you all and Happy New Year, Happy New Decade. We are a more casual advisory committee than other district committees, but we do follow Robert's rules and the Brown Act, just not very, we tend to let people, we're not so strict about the Brown Act that we ask you not to talk, we encourage conversations. We do ask that if you're talking about your individual child that you keep in mind that we are recording. We are not recording and putting it out there live. I do edit, so if it gets too personal subject, I will be cutting that portion and just adding a note to the film of why a section was cut. But if you want to help with an individual child situation, we actually have purple half sheets on the table there that we'd like you to fill out so we protect the privacy of your individual. And if you could turn it in to our secretary, Sue Pavlik, over there. And then we'll make sure that the district responds to, we used to give them 24 hours, we give them 48 hours, it's a busy time of year. Okay, so Happy New Year and welcome to the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education, or less of a mouthful, CAC-SE. I'm calling the fourth meeting of 2019-2020 school year to order at 6:04 p.m. Before our business, we have some guests. So I'd like to, I know we haven't been introducing ourselves very often because it's been a small group and we've all known each other. But I'm seeing enough new faces, I would like to go around the room and introduce ourselves. My name is Kristen Brown. I'm the chair of the Community Advisory Committee, and I'll linger afterwards if you need to talk to me individually.
I'm Rebecca Everett. I'm a parent. I'm the vice chair of the committee.
Peter Alvarez, a parent and the treasurer of the committee.
I'm going to ask that we go a little slow because we have translation, and I don't want to go so fast. And so when you speak, if you can be loud and clear, please. Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Mieri, and I'm the president of the Mieri Center, and we provide educational-related mental health services and counseling for the students throughout San Jose Unified.
I'm Brian Wheatley. I'm the school board trustee here in San Jose Unified, and so this committee, I apologize in advance. I'm also on the PTA committee, and they meet at 7.
Sue Pavlik, acting secretary for CAC-SE Parent and High Schooler at San Jose.
I'm Seth Reddy. I'm the director of special education for the district.
Michelle Regito, principal at Hero Elementary.
Alana Kelly Wilson, principal at Brown.
I'm Joanna French, senior manager of research and policy at San Jose Public Schools.
Veronica Dushman, community organizer with Innovative Schools.
My name is Hector Ortiz. I'm the father of one of the kids in the school for special ed.
Soy Evelina Rivas y soy padre líder de Innova. Innova Public School.
Innova Public School.
Yo soy Lula Ramírez y tengo un niño en el distrito de San José.
Your parents from the Peace District? ¿Qué es cuál es?
En este distrito. Innova. Ajá, yo vivo en el mismo grupo.
The same group?
Same person,
She
yeah.
has a student here in San Jose.
So we're probably most of the new faces, and we're all coming from Innovate Public Schools just to get a sense of the CAC-SE meetings and understand what's happening.
That's great. I attend a lot of the different meetings on my DLAC here. The PTA council I usually slip off data too. So yes, it's smart.
So thank you for asking us.
Absolutely.
I'm Karina Alvarez. I'm the vice principal at Willow Glen Elementary.
Nora Magaña, SMS coordinator with student services.
Veronica Lara, Manager of Family Engagement.
Sandra Asher, member of the CAC-SE.
María del Mayo es uno de los intérpretes. Yo soy María, estoy para traducciones.
And because we have translation services tonight, I want to remind everyone to speak a little slowly so that we're not going too fast. We tend to get passionate. Take a breath, please. And then if you could just be mindful to speak one at a time too. Thank you. So I want to thank you all for those introductions. I do see we have a quorum. So all members should have a copy of the November agenda to approve. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. As we go through the business of approving our agenda, I invite any new guests to read over the lovely laminated purpose of meeting, and I'm sorry, I don't think I have that in Spanish yet. I don't know, I haven't read it. We need to approve the January 27th agenda. Are there any changes? Okay, no changes? Do I have a motion for members to approve the January 27th agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay. Okay. So, Sue moved and it's seconded by Rebecca Everett. Thank you. Yes, sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, is there anyone against? Okay, thank you. We do need to approve the minutes from the November 2019 meeting. I hope the members had time to review these documents and ask if there are any changes to those documents. Okay, no one's raising a hand for changes.
I move to approve the minutes from the November meeting.
Okay, Sandra moves to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, hey, 2 seconds. Fight it out. Hold on. Okay. All members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Wonderful. Rebecca, could you read through the meeting norms we approved in the fall?
Yes, we have 1, assume positive intentions. 2, let one person speak at a time. 3, speak clearly and at a moderate pace that allows translation.
That's great, thank you. Our district presentation is early on the agenda so that district staff do not have to stay too long of the day. We appreciate that you have stayed to present to us on mental health in the district, and on your table, I've added to the conversation, I guess, but just for your information. It's an article about some funding that the state has for mental health. It's a drop in the bucket, as one of the respondents has said. But it's millions of dollars that the state has toward mental health. It's a great start. I'm not gonna speak out against it. We'll take that money, but there's a lot of students in California, and I'm not so sure that 50 million, is that what it is? I'm not sure 50 million is sufficient for the needs, but it's a great start. So, gosh, we are, so we will, after the presentation of mental health, we will come back and begin with public comment, okay? There'll be just a couple minutes while we transition. If you haven't had a chance to get some water or food, please do.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. I think while we're transitioning, there's a Spanish translation and the English version of the PowerPoint I'm gonna go over. So just so you have it, follow along, jot down notes. All right, so we'll get started then. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's great to see some new faces here, so really appreciate that. Looking forward to talking with you. I'm going to try to go slowly, so Maria in voice. So I'm going to be facilitating this presentation, but I've got several folks in the room who are going to be giving a lot of their input and who definitely have more expertise than I do about some of the delivery of our mental health services in our schools. So you heard from Nora earlier, who's our schooling services coordinator, and then Jenny, who's the president of the group that provides educationally related mental health services to our students. We also have Alana and Michelle in the back, two principals from our district, who I think can talk a little bit about what this might look like in the context of a school site. So, Kristen put an article on the table, which is great. She kind of one-ups me in the presentation. So I wanted to start, before we talk about what services we provide related to mental health in our schools, with just a little bit of research that I found, I think this summer when I was looking, just about what a principal's perspective is around mental health in schools. And so the RAND Corporation is part of, I think, a report that they were commissioned to do to assess the efficacy of funding that the state of California has done as it relates to mental health. Did a poll of all principals at all public schools in California. I think the response rate was about 70%. And through that report by the principals, they came up with a couple of key takeaways, just statistics that I wanted to share with you. So they found that 75% of principals from all schools, elementary, middle, and high school, cited students' social, emotional, and mental health as a moderate or severe problem at their school that impacted students' learning. About half of middle school principals reported that student depression was a moderate and severe problem. And then about half of high school principals also reported significant concerns about alcohol, drug, and tobacco use as a moderate or severe problem among their students, often to potentially cope with mental health struggles that they were having. So I thought that this really highlighted and summed up the need that we're seeing across our school sites. And we're going to talk about services that we offer all students in the district related to mental health. And so I know this is a special education committee. I'm from special education, but Nora's from our student services department. And I want to highlight that this is really about all of our students here. And we try to provide services in the most inclusive manner possible. There are some additional services for students with IEPs that a student without an IEP may not have access to. But just wanted to highlight that this is a need definitely across the entire student population. And there's some specifics around special education that are important to note as well. So, obviously, as we just looked at the statistics show, principals are very concerned with this, and I think we've seen here in the district as well a rise in the past 5 to 10 years of mental health needs for our students. And our vision as a district is to prepare our students to be the thinkers, leaders, and creators of tomorrow. So obviously it's extremely important that we are able to meet students' social and emotional needs to allow them to achieve this vision. So I just wanted to ground us in that before we move forward. And we're going to talk about sort of two things that I just alluded to. We're going to start with talking about the mental health services that are available to all students in our schools, whether or not you have an IEP. Just any student in our schools, the types of services that we offer. There's some things that I'm not going to touch on here just because they're pretty detailed. For example, Pioneer High School this year is piloting a wellness center that's a fantastic idea that I hope will grow. I don't have a slide on it or really get into the details of it just because it's pretty limited to that school site, and I wanted to keep this a little bit more general. But there are definitely some things that happen in our school sites that I might not touch on here that are unique to a particular site. But just know that, and please ask questions throughout. And then after we talk about what's available to all students, we're going to talk about specifically what's available to students who have an IEP and that the services are part of meeting the needs of their disability. So, all right, and please ask questions throughout. And Nora, can you interject on the wrong one? So I'm going to start with our student support counselors. So when we think about services in our district, across the variety of things, mental health, behavioral, academic, we often use jargon around tiers, so tiered supports. So we talk about tier 1 support, tier 2 support, tier 3 support. Tier 1 supports would be the things that our school environments and our teachers just embed in the regular course of the day to meet students' needs. So for example, around behavior, tier 1 interventions could be a lot of the stuff we do through positive behavior intervention support services at our schools. Visuals about, what's the Bret Hart one?
HR squared.
HR squared, so the 3 sort of characteristics that Bret Hart students have. Tier 2 is where you start to get slightly more individualized for a student, but it's a little more intensive level of support. So in the mental health world, that might mean joining a group of like students to talk to, or being part of a targeted intervention for a group of students. And our student support counselors really operate at that tier 2 level in doing a couple of things. Helping students and their families link with external services that are available in the community, and then also running things at our schools, like I talked about, with groups around improving attendance, and the root cause of that might be around mental health, working with the families, doing home visits, things of that nature, to help assist some of these students. So not your sit-down one-to-one intensive therapy with the student, but things sort of the tier below that. And in the district, we have 22 full-time employees who serve as student support counselors. And so 19 of them are at elementary schools, 2 are at middle schools. And they're allocated based on 2 factors. One is socioeconomic status at a school, so concentrated primarily at our schools with a high percentage of students with low socioeconomic status. And then they're also allocated in high truancy schools as well. And those 2 tend to overlap, unsurprisingly. But those are the 2 factors that the district uses in assigning those staff to sites. And that's part of our commitment to make sure we're putting resources where there's the most need.
So these would only be available to students at those schools that have these
Yep,
counselors,
that's
not
correct.
available to students at
That's
all
correct.
schools.
Yep, and we'll talk a little bit about like the next layer, which gets everybody.
And
Yeah.
there is none in the high schools?
Correct. There are not student support counselors in the high schools. Right. That's correct. You were a student support counselor, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to add anything to.
Well, I was here at the district, and that's actually another layer of counselors that in a way is available to everyone in the district, which is the crisis support team. I was a member of the crisis support team, and it's a 2.5 position. And believe it or not, we are able to serve the whole district with 2.5 staff. And we are all student support counselors in that team that support any school that needs it. Now, this team is reserved for crisis type of matters, but let's say that this week there wasn't any crisis and we have a student that needs a lot of support at Michelle's school, then we can allocate that time to go support that student at that particular elementary school. So in a way, even though this team is not assigned to a particular school, it can serve all schools, and it does throughout the school year.
You said 2.5, you mean the equivalent of 2.5 full-time positions?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, because not everyone here speaks education. Okay,
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. The crisis team. Yeah.
Why isn't there any at the high schools?
Yeah, I think there's different supports. I think the initial, and I think that's a really good question to highlight how the needs of students are definitely changing over time, right? And as a big public organization, it takes time sometimes for us to adjust as well. And so I think that, like, yeah, if you want to answer initially why they were allocated the way they were, and then maybe.
And one of the things that happens in the high schools, they have academic counselors. The schooling for social emotional counselors and academic counselor is the same. We go through the same training process. As we enter the field, some of us go into the mental health piece, and others go into the academic piece. So our high school academic counselors, and there's several per high school, are well trained as well to respond to some of the mental health needs of these students. Now, they do not sit and provide services one-on-one, but when they do meet with students for academic support, they do the mental health check-in as well, and then refer accordingly.
How is this conveyed to students to know that they have the option to go to their academic counselor if they need different support?
Generally speaking, if I am a student at a high school and I have a need, let's say something happened with my friend, my family last night, and I come to school not feeling well, the student is then sent to the office where resources will be assessed whether this student needs to go see a tier of support that Seth will be talking about soon, or to one of the academic counselors that is on site. So administration would be, I guess.
Yeah, and the academic counselors too do a variety of like, sort of, I guess, outreach events or sort of advertisement of the services that they offer in schools, and I think, yeah, like Nora said, the teachers as well link, you know, link students with them that they know are struggling with need.
Am I getting ahead of you if I ask about what kind of lag time a student might face if they need support?
What kind of,
Lag time between, hey, I'm in,
yeah,
you know, this
Yeah.
is what, I've just lost my dog versus I've just lost my mother,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Different support.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what kind of lag time would a student face with that need?
And that's a very good point, that it depends on the level of crisis, right? If it is my dog died and that's a loved family member, but we know that the student at this moment is not in an immediate risk, we may have that student wait for the crisis support team, for example. The crisis support team will get there depending on how far the school is from the current location, but it'll be 15 to 20 minutes if there's no one on site who can support. If it is more immediate than that, every single school has a provider, that Seth will talk about it more, and that provider will be interrupted to come support the student that is in immediate crisis. So it will be immediate for a high need.
Thank you.
And I wanted to, this is the danger of just talking without looking at my notes. I did want to, actually before I jumped into this, state that I'm not going to explicitly talk about a lot of the tier 1 support that is provided by a bunch of people on campus that aren't trained mental health professionals. So the academic counselors are trained, similar to a social emotional counselor, but our teachers, our principals, I mean, they all are providing support to students initially, and are sort of, you know, like it's not that they're hands off with that, right? Like they work a lot with students in that capacity and link them and refer them to the appropriate people around the school for those services.
When you talked about tier 2 support, you talked about support for the parents and for the students. And that's available on the elementary and middle school level. Is it available on high school level? Support for the parents and the families?
It could be, I think, yeah, based on need. Yeah, based on need. We'll talk a little bit about like the counseling services that are available, but yeah, I mean, you know, in terms of assessing an individual student and family's needs, yeah, similar to how some students it's appropriate or it's necessary to do multiple home visits to ensure that they're coming to school. You know, there's different levels of need that a parent or a family might have.
Seth and our academic counselors are often doing that, especially around attendance. I have seen the academic counselors coming to, let's say, some of the very severe cases that are sitting in court, coming to court to provide support to the parent and the student, and then connect them to community resources.
Can I just name my elephant? My kid's involved in drugs, and he is getting all of the supports from the whole community in every way that we can find. I'm not finding anything for parents.
Yeah, I mean, you know, some of it is just to keep working with us and seeing what solutions there are. Yeah. Right.
The city told me, the police department told me, that's a parental issue. We don't.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot on sort of the need, but yeah, but I hear what you're saying. Okay, excellent, great questions. So I'm going to go next to talk about sort of Nora's expertise, which is school-linked services. So I actually, since you're here, I'm going to just have you, can you talk about how those build on top of the school counselors instead of me giving
Sure,
I know you can
I'll
tag
do
team
my
that, so
best.
Yeah.
How many people here are familiar with school link services and what it means? I see two familiar faces from Cornell School Health that should know it very well. So school link services was born out of the need for mental health services at schools. So in the past, and I was a clinician providing mental health services in Santa Clara County back in the day, and many schools did not allow us to come into school. I was told no many times, so particular schools will tell me we are not that kind of school that allows therapists to come on campus. So the county as a whole, behavioral health saw that need of breaking that barrier between education and mental health, and they came out with schooling services where mental health providers from the community come to the school site to provide services there. Not only does it break that barrier and it forces us in a way to work education and mental health work hand on hand, it also allows the students to access services. We know that some parents are way too busy, some parents have so many obstacles that get in the way of taking their kids to an office to get therapy, so they can now access that in school. So that's what schooling services is. Within schooling services, there are many different programs that we have here at San Jose Unified. Other districts, let's say Campbell, for example, they have schools where a single school has a position like mine, and that person serves the whole school. At San Jose Unified, and we're advocating for more, we were only allocated one position, so that is my role, and I serve the whole district. And my role is to bring, to keep on building partnerships with community providers to bring more mental health services and connect more students and families to other services also, not just mental health. Yes?
In an ideal world, based on the need that you're seeing, how many people like you would there be in the district?
You know, in an ideal world, and again, here goes my therapist side, I will say every single student should have a therapist. That's in my ideal world. Realistically, I've been advocating for 2 more staff at the district level. How likely is that to happen? I don't know. So more realistically, I would say 2 additional staff, so that we could even divide it by elementary, middle, and high school possibly. Again, there's a model that is being tested at Campbell and Alum Rock, where they do have a district level staff like me, and they have coordinators at the particular schools. So they're gathering data to see how that works and if it's worth funding. So the eye is on it.
And the biggest constraint too, just to clarify as well, is the funding that we get to administer this program, basically, is the big constraint. Like it is in a lot of things with public education, but it's less of a choice of the district, more of how much funds we're allocated for providing this.
Right.
Really quick, is this programs offered for monolingual students and parents as well?
Yes, absolutely.
What will be the languages that you guys offer?
So the clinicians that come onto campus mainly speak Spanish, Vietnamese, and English. If we have a need for a language that we do not have on campus, the county then searches throughout the whole county to find a provider that can serve that youth in that particular language. Not to say that we're able to do it every time. There are some languages that there's just no therapists who speak that language in the county. There's few that we haven't been able to serve, but the majority we are able to serve. And the main languages are those, English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Yes?
Did the schooling services and the school needing to take responsibility happen when the responsibility for mental health services for students was transferred from the county to the school districts? Is that linked?
So what happened is, I want to say that San Jose Unified reached out for this program when the program was first developed, and then it came to San Jose Unified. San Jose Unified developed it in a way that made more sense for this district.
But yeah, I think it was born out of the shift from, I was actually going to talk a little bit about it, from AB, whatever it was, to 114. Yeah, I think that the county was born out of that shift. Okay, so we're gonna keep talking about schooling services. So the population served by schooling services is again sort of a little bit less than the whole population, and then we'll talk about how we serve the whole population. So it's students residing in high-risk areas that Santa Clara County has identified, and I've put up the factors that they looked at in the study that they commissioned to determine where to, like, how to fund and where to allocate the resources. And again, it's based on a lot of the factors that you might anticipate, but it's trying to allocate resources to the areas where there's the most need. That's the bottom line.
What providers do we, the SEND as a unified contract with to provide the county mental health services?
Promise I didn't pay you to ask that question.
There you go.
Next. And I don't know how this got here, so that's a typo. But those are, I think, our four biggest ones, and Nora, I know there's more than that. I just put up sort of
Yeah, those are our biggest ones. Yeah.
the biggest ones. So Community Solutions, Gardner Family Care Corporation, Uplift, and Bill Wilson Center.
Can you speak a little bit towards what these providers, I mean, some of these are a little bit niched in what they cover, so I think it can help to have a little more perspective on what they offer.
Yeah. Nora's probably the best person for that.
They look different in our district again. These are all community organizations that provide a bunch of services. Like Bill Wilson, for example, their focus is homelessness and preventing youth homelessness. The one branch of their services is mental health. So in our district, Community Solutions, purely mental health services for children. Gardner Family Care Corporation, they tap into students who have Medi-Cal. So if any of your students is seeking counseling and your student happens to have Medi-Cal, Gardner will bill Medi-Cal to get reimbursed for those services. And this is leveraging money so that they can serve more students. So when they can, they leverage Medi-Cal. We also pay a given set amount every year to Gardner to serve some of our schools for students who do not have Medi-Cal, who wouldn't have access to counseling otherwise. And that money comes out of student services and coordinated school health. And coordinated school health is medical reimbursement through our nursing program here at the district. And we have 2 members of the committee sitting here. Uplift Family Services serves 9 of our schools, and that provider is our main SLS provider. So the county assigned Uplift to serve 9 schools in San Jose Unified who have those high-risk factors. Those factors, again, were identified by the county. They chose the 9 schools, and Uplift is a provider at those schools. The beauty of this provider at those 9 schools is that the scope is really wide. So if the kid needs a very high level of support to the point that wraparound services are needed, this provider can do that. So they will come into the home, serve the family 3-4 times per week, see the student at school, see the student at home, provide transportation. They do winter groups, summer groups. They take very good care of the families. And I wish we had that level of care in all 41 schools. But we have it at 9 so far. Hopefully it will grow. And then Bill Wilson Center serves our whole district for any student who has Medi-Cal. So if your student at any grade level has Medi-Cal or can qualify for Medi-Cal, Bill Wilson can serve them. Some students just haven't applied, but they qualify. They will help them with the process of getting connected to Medi-Cal as well. Any other questions regarding the providers? Yes?
Is Uplift, are they the ones that the city provided a grant? Well, I know that one of the counselors is working with my son is paid through a city grant, and the counselor chose which school. Are you familiar with that?
No. I mean, the city has been given a lot of grants recently. Like we have one through YWCA and through ACI. And these grants are very specific for very specific populations.
He's a drug and alcohol counselor, paid for through the city grant.
Yeah, so that would be the SUTS program, right? Substance Use Treatment Services. And what that does, the county used to be the sole provider of those services, and they got too overwhelmed. There's just too many needs, so they contracted providers like Uplift, actually, yeah. So Uplift and Allen Rock were given a grant to go serve the schools, and we have access to those services here in San Jose Unified. This year, we actually have one elementary school using the SUPS, which is the Substance Use Prevention Services. And one elementary school is using it for life skills, how to make good choices. Because you will think in elementary school, how do you talk to kids about drugs, right? And they're not talking about drugs or substance prevention in itself. They're talking about how do you make good choices? You know, how do you differentiate good from bad or peer influences? And that is a service that we have, every single school in the district has access.
Any of these programs provide dual diagnosis?
Yes, yes, and Uplift is one of them, even more than 2 diagnoses.
Are parents aware of that?
Yes, actually, Uplift, again, is one of the providers that works with the whole family.
But only at those 9 schools.
Only at those 9 schools, however, here's the other magic service that we have. We have the County Mental Health Call Center. Anybody familiar with that number? Yes. So if you call the 1-800 number at the county and you said, I want Uplift to serve my youth, they will send you referral to Uplift. So you can request a specific agency that you want. You can also request, all of these community providers can serve your youth at school, but if you don't want them at school, you can request to be served only at home. We have families that don't want anybody at their homes either, so the kids get served in a public library, sometimes in a park when the weather is nice, whatever works for the student and the family. Yes.
Tengo una pregunta.
¿Cuál es su pregunta?
Respecto a lo de los proveedores de servicio, ¿qué pasa cuando el centro de Bill Wilson te dio un diagnóstico de ansiedad o de algún diagnóstico que te dio el de Bill Wilson y tú lo llevas el papel a la escuela para que tu niña le realicen un IP y en la escuela te dicen que este papel que viene de Bill Wilson no es válido para que en la escuela te le practiquen el IP a tu niña, que tiene que ser uno que venga médicamente, no del psicólogo?
So, talking about the service providers, what happens in a situation when you go to Bill Wilson Center with your daughter, for example, and they give you a diagnosis of anxiety or depression or some kind of mental health problem, and you go with this paper to the school to request an IEP, but they tell you in the school that it has to be a medical diagnosis, certificated diagnosis, and this is not from Bill Wilson. What happens then?
Yeah. I can answer that.
Yeah, that is yours,
So actually that's interesting. I thought your question was going to be the other way around. I think that's what we see more. I mean, basically, the school, when considering a request for an IEP, has to consider any relevant factors that you provide. And so I think, in that situation, it would be more requesting an evaluation for special education services and providing that document as something to use when considering the evaluation of your student for special education services. Yeah, and so whether it's medical or not, a medical diagnosis is not the same as qualifying for special education in a school site setting. I've seen prescriptions from doctors for some pretty creative things that they consider like necessary medically that doesn't apply to the student's educational progress in school. But the same thing goes for something from Bill Wilson Center. It's a piece of data for the IEP team to consider. We follow the process as it's outlined, in EdCode and IDEA. So I would say if they say no, you'd say I'd like my student evaluated for services, provide that document, and then the district would consider that when they determine whether or not to assess, and then if they do assess, whether or not to qualify. Yeah.
Sí, pero una vez que ya dices tú, yo de todos modos quiero que a mi hijo lo evalúen, tú mandas mandas la carta pidiendo el IP y te llega la carta diciendo que tu hijo no califica para que le hagan la evaluación.
However, even when you request that assessment or that evaluation, you receive a letter back saying that your student is not eligible to perform an assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that certainly happens. So our school psychologist reviews all the information that they have about your student, including including most importantly, their progress in school and their current performance, but also taking into account, has the student actually attended school, and some other factors. And if they determine in their professional opinion that a special education assessment isn't warranted, they can write what's called a prior written notice, letting you know that that's the decision that the school psychologist in the district has made. So yeah, I mean, that does happen. That does happen. There's a lot of factors they consider. I think, like, not to sound really official, but your parents' rights, which I think are a great resource, sort of outline what your rights are, in the process following something like that happening.
Seth,
Yeah.
could I suggest that maybe part of, I've experienced that, and part of the process be that when a psychologist looks through and does a record review, that part of that review needs to be a conversation with the parent or whomever is requesting it. Because when, if I submit a request for evaluation and get back a, sorry, it doesn't look like your kid needs this, not having had that conversation, how can that possibly be?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think, I'll consider it. Yeah, I think, what we're doing is in full compliance with, what the law allows for. So I think it's a good suggestion that I'll consider. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's the law, but
Yeah.
law across the board for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they definitely talk to the teachers and get input.
But it's the parent who's requesting.
True.
It's your, true concerns, and not just saying,
Yeah.
my kid needs this.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about my student.
Yeah.
Oh, Michelle, you had your hand up
I was
first.
gonna say, another thing we might consider at the site level is a 504, with a special ed team, they can
Certainly.
put together and think that could be an option for a child with anxiety.
I would agree.
And I just wanted to add the counseling perspective too, that, because as a crisis counselor, we did encounter a lot of parents as well, who were very unhappy with the situation with their student and the services, and a conversation that is often not had is that it can be a good thing when your student is not qualifying for special ed, right? They are looking, and I'm not an expert in special ed, but I do know that they look at many different components, including grades, attendance, different pieces. And if your student is not qualifying, that often means that your student is doing decent, maybe not perfect, but that your student is up there with the rest of the students in the general education population. So getting a letter back that says your student doesn't qualify is not always a bad thing. I think that's an angle that we often miss, or a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to build on too, because I think so it's all taxpayer money, right, that funds all of our positions. So no one's saying no because it's a personal benefit to them, or saying the student isn't warranted in assessment. It's because they're often thinking about what does the students need and what kind of services is that student going to get. And so especially with mental health, I think it's relevant that mental health isn't really one of the 13 qualifying disabilities for special education. Other health impairment has sort of become a catch-all bucket that was originally for the ADHD sort of diagnosis, but and I think it's great that we have that flexibility. But students can get services for mental health needs without an IEP, and you have to look at how it impacts their education, whether or not it's truly a disability. Because again, like Nora said, sometimes it can be a good thing as long as we're getting the student the right services. And I think there's been a myth that you can only get certain services under an IEP, and I think that that's not always true, especially in the arena of mental health.
I just wanted to add that the parent bubble of information sometimes doesn't have the right terminology to get the point across that anxiety is maybe impacting their education. And so it's helpful sometimes to reach out to a group like Parents Helping Parents and say, I've gotten this letter declining an assessment for special education. I still feel there's a need. They'll talk through with you and get better information and help you with terminology to, again, send that notice in saying, this is my request, and now I have a better way of expressing it that might get you further along. I had a better second letter for my son, and it pushed the envelope in the right way. So I would just suggest that if you still feel there's a need for an assessment, don't feel that letter saying you don't qualify is in stone. it's never in stone. Our kids are changing all the time, so it's never in stone. So tap into resources to help you.
One other step I would say, even before you write your first letter, is talk to your site principal. They know your student, they know all about what they can offer at their school site. Talk to the principal, express the needs and concerns that you have, and they can, I think, really help you like figure out a plan potentially. Yeah, and that plan may involve special education, but it may not. You know. Yeah.
So the school, just to clarify, the schooling services are available to all students, even students without an IEP.
So that's, yes. So schooling services is actually designed for all general education students. And we often say, if you have an IEP, seek counseling services through your IEP if that is the reason for qualifying for the IEP. That's not to say that students with an IEP do not benefit from SLS, because they do. Sometimes even the counselor itself, a community agency provider counselor is a better fit for a particular student than our counselor for this other program, and it's just a personality fit sometimes. Other times is when there's crisis situations or general education SLS counselors will serve students who have an IEP as well. Yeah.
And if you don't have an IEP, you can still get mental health services.
Absolutely, they're actually designed for you if you don't have an IEP.
Yeah, actually, everything we've been talking to up until now is without IEP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, two things, Alana and then Stephen.
I just wanted to echo what you said about reaching out for support, because we have 15 days to respond as a district to our class for testing, then another 60 days to complete the testing and hold a meeting. So particularly if there's an urgent need, that could be quite a gap, even if the student does end up qualifying. And if the student doesn't qualify and the need is still there, then hopefully we could have been working on some solutions in the interim. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's great.
And I thought it was a great question. CAC should really spend some energy. San Jose Unified often doesn't accept the Bill Wilson Center for qualification, but the charter schools don't even like to write the letter of denial. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but at least San Jose Unified is letting parents know what qualifies you and what doesn't. The charter schools return the students back to the district. So that's something CAC, this is a great question, what qualifies a student for special education services? And CAC taking a look at, are all schools open to all students, is a great topic. It's a great question, but we should look at all schools.
We're actually
Innovate
committed
would
to
love to
ask
do
other
that, Steve.
schools too, yeah.
Yeah, Innovate would love to hold them all to go.
Let's start doing that.
Let's do it. I'd love to work with you on that. Yeah, our parents are going to talk to us. We need to set up a meeting with you.
Definitely start with Seth and Kristen. Because CAC doesn't oversee, it's not just San Jose Unified.
Yeah, we'd love to work with you on that.
Okay.
Yes.
When the private notice is sent for the additional, are the parent rights sent along with it? Yes.
In the native language.
That's kind of great, so the lawyer doesn't have to read it.
It's the ones from the state website, yeah, which is like what we have to provide. Yeah. Okay.
That is.
I think you actually covered everything.
Maybe.
I think so. This was the last slide.
Okay, let's see it.
Yeah, about services available for students, sort of in the general setting. I don't know if I guess one thing we didn't talk about is outside of SLS, we also contract with several of the same providers to
Do you have that slide or?
I don't. I just
Okay.
have this one. Yeah.
So Seth showed you the list of the main providers that we work with. And in addition to that, we have a bunch of other providers. Some serving only one school, some serving several schools. And so those are the additional services that we provide. So for example, we have one elementary school receiving services only for students who have been victimized. And the qualifications are different, so these students are kids who have private insurance or no insurance. So we have partnerships with providers like these throughout the different schools to meet the needs of the different schools. Some of our schools already benefit from SLS intense services. Some of the days that we purchase from other providers, we give to those schools. That is interesting, Seth. I didn't know that those are also the two schools that you were talking about earlier that receive the more support. Those are the two schools that we give additional services to because of the high needs that they have. So yeah, building partnerships all the time to bring more services. It's a point there.
Are those counseling services provided at provided by the district at all schools, or do PTA funds have to provide that at some of the school sites?
No, the funding comes from student services from the district's budget and from coordinated school health, which is the nurses bill Medi-Cal to get some of the reimbursement for
And
health
SLPs.
services they provide. What is that?
And the SLPs. They're
Yes,
actually the biggest.
that's true, SLPs too, yeah.
Is that new? Because I believe when my son was in elementary
Few
school, PTA had to
years.
pay for it.
How old is the coordinated school health?
I don't know how old the committee is, but it's been many years that we've been able to build that account.
And I know that the grant, I think, into the mental health services has been around for at least 6 years. I think they have funded us for 6 years or so.
Prior to that maybe PTA was funding, so.
You know, and actually, PTA always has that option, right? So spring semester is a busy time where schools have full capacity with counseling and they need additional counseling days. There's always an option to purchase additional counseling days at any point of the semester. We have a provider that is quite affordable and is able to provide those services at any point. So I do know that some schools are able to come to the PTA and say that, hey, will you give us money to purchase one additional day of counseling? And they do.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that.
Yeah, you can purchase days.
And just to clarify, to make sure, since we're at a special education meeting, that's for students outside the IEP process. Obviously, for students with an IEP, there's no sort of constraint on our funding to get them the services that they need. But obviously, you know, we wish we were funded at a higher rate for people in our district entirely, so we could offer like an embedded counselor. And actually, Nora and I, and then the Director of Student Services, Dane, have been talking about how to just look holistically at the services we provide, both in general education and special education, and how we can leverage those, maximize the dollars that we do have available to spend, how we can leverage that to maximize the services we get. So I think there might be some creative ways we can for next year to maybe entice providers to give us more services for lower rates.
I'm just curious because you talked about parent organizations helping purchase extra days of counseling. If that is possible on every single campus, and if not, how those campuses that don't have those parent organizations, if they have resources that they can use to get those extra counseling days.
And if they have those resources, I wouldn't know that, but one of the things that I can tell you for sure is that we distribute the services equally among all the schools to ensure that all the schools are served. And the population, the size of the school is taken into account, but we do ensure that every school has at least 2 full days of counseling. Yeah.
And then you'll get the, like, just to add on to like how we assign student support counselors and the SLS funds, we're trying to eliminate any, like, concentrate the resources where there is the most need, so that for the additional services, so for example, you know, a school with a higher income population, they get 2 days through the district, but they might have the resources to purchase additional days as well.
You can also use federal money to purchase a day.
Yeah.
Because it's a social emotional need.
That's right.
Can you, I'm sorry, what monies? I couldn't hear you.
Federal money.
Oh, okay.
And the principals have something that you guys each year lay out in your school plan for student achievement, the SIPSA, how they're going to use the federal funds that they do have for their schools, and that's one of the
That's true, Michelle, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and it's good, it's sort of like, you
I
know,
like to know
localizing
about
the
schools.
spend.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
Good.
And if you let me know, if the school lets me know at the beginning of the school year that they're interested in purchasing an additional day or 2 days, we can get a provider that is even more affordable. This provider can only, because they hire the staff at the beginning of the school year, they can only give us more day at the beginning of the school year. The other provider that can serve us at any point throughout the school year is a little bit more expensive. So do keep that in mind as well, okay?
Thanks, Laura. All right, moving here. So we're going to transition into sort of the special education world. So just want to put a point on that all those things we just talked about are available to all students including those with an IEP. So for example, if you have dyslexia, and you're receiving services for that dyslexia through special education, you might have a social emotional need that is unrelated to that, and you would receive the counseling through one of those services. So just to put a point on that. But I wanted to just do a little bit of law, and we alluded to this earlier, just to sort of set the stage for how we provide mental health services to students with disabilities in our schools. Assembly Bill 3632 sort of like governed the provision of mental health services in schools for from 1987 to 2011. What it basically said is that county mental health agencies are responsible for providing educationally related mental health services, which we will define shortly, to students with disabilities in school. And that was, it's my understanding that was very different than how other parts of the country did it. It was in California, and while it, I guess, worked for those years, it ultimately proved to be just inefficient and untenable for the county mental health providers to be pushing into schools. And I don't know all the specifics about that, but ultimately the legislators decided to change that model. Sorry.
What it excluded or made it extremely difficult for a particular group of students to receive services. And that was students who were adopted, received adoption assistance, and lived in a county other than where they were adopted.
Really?
It required that students' families to transport them back to the county of origin. So if I moved to way up, I have to bring them back to the county I adopted for mental health services.
Yeah, I didn't read about that. I was, because I'm not an expert in the law particularly, and I was just looking at it last night. Yeah, I didn't see that come up, but that's really interesting to know. Yeah, so some logistical challenges. So the legislators passed AB 114 in 2011, and that basically returned the responsibility for providing education-related mental health services to students with disabilities back to the school districts. So that's where we are today, but it's relatively new for school districts to be providing those services. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do so in special education. Okay, so I'm going to have Jenny sort of go through the specifics because she's the expert, but I wanted to talk just a little bit about the continuum of services. I know a lot of you weren't here. We looked at this sort of pyramid when we talked about the programs that we offer around the district, and I just wanted to point out that the same thing is at work for educationally related mental health services. So the IEP team, if a student has an IEP team, really considers the full continuum of how we can provide those services in the least restrictive environment. And so it's not a perfect analogy, but basically, as I explained when we did the program presentation, that we are looking to serve as many students as we can in that top bucket in the general education setting. A smaller group that are in special education, obviously, that receive supports in their class, which obviously mental health services, that's a little difficult to do for the most part. You're not pushing in and providing students with individual support in the class, but for example, you might have a group that happens in a class to support students. Sort of less students receiving full-out education-related mental health services during the school day. So the factors to consider are just that student is going to be missing academic time, and this is a student who already has a disability, and so you want to be mindful of that, how you time it and how you schedule it. And we're going to focus the rest of our time really talking about this, but I'm happy to at the end get into, there are some students who have mental health needs that are more severe than that. And we're fortunate enough as a big district to be able to offer specific programs at the K through 12 level that are therapeutic in nature. So we call it a therapeutic special day class that has a lot of embedded social emotional supports, a full-time counselor attached to the program to an elementary one, a middle one, and multiple programs in high school, but a full-time counselor for just the 12 students in that program. But that's, again, a small population. And then there are some students beyond that whose social emotional needs are greater than what we can serve in a district program. And we may refer them out to Santa Clara County Office of Education or to a non-public school that specializes in working with students whose social emotional needs really impact their ability to learn. So we're going to focus the majority here, but like I said at the end, I'm happy to take questions about that later. And so with that, I'm going to ask Jenny to give us some information about education-related mental health services, and then we can talk a little bit about questions that you guys have around it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm from the Mary Center, and we have about 12 therapists throughout San Jose Unified going to different schools providing educationally related mental health services. And we came into this district right after the AB 114 passed. It was 2011 or 2012 that we ended up coming over here. But we, I'd say the most common service that we're providing, the most common education-related mental health service that we're providing is individual counseling. That ends up being typically the need that the students that are getting referred to us that they have is individual counseling. And just to give you the definition of what educationally related mental health services, which is also called ERMS, E-R-M-H-S, those services are offered to students with IEPs who have significant social, emotional, and or behavioral needs that are adversely impacting their educational performance. A student with an IEP may be referred for ERMS counseling if the concern being addressed is educationally related. So the reason that term educationally related is important is because in order to get a referral for education ERMS services, the student it has to be determined that the student's mental health concern is affecting them educationally. So that could be socially, emotionally, and or academically that fall under that educational need. And it's important to understand this because as Seth has been talking about, there are all kinds of other services and support out there that can address some of the mental health needs that students have if it's determined that the specific mental health concern that is being seen isn't related to their education. So an example of that might be, a person who has anxiety or depression and has an IEP and they're really struggling in school. Their grades are falling, they don't have friends, they're very withdrawn, or they're having a lot of acting out behaviors. So it's determined that this student is being affected educationally and they might be referred for our services. However, you might have a student who has an IEP who is dealing with something very common like anxiety or depression, but it's determined that it's not affecting their education. So it might be there's a lot of students, a lot of people in general that do struggle with anxiety and depression. So I'm just using that as an example, but there might be some other support services that would be offered to the student if it's not written on their IEP as an educationally related mental health service. So, any questions coming up so far about that?
Can you just read the definition again? It was.
Yeah, sure. So educationally related mental health services are offered to students with IEPs who have significant social, emotional, and or behavioral needs that are adversely impacting their educational performance. And then also it just has to be educationally related, the mental health concern, anything that has to be educationally related. Oftentimes, students, it's determined that they're struggling socially and emotionally even after some other support has been offered. So a lot of times we may not be the initial service that gets offered, and it's only after some other support has been offered and tried, and it's determined that something a little bit more, the issue is a little bit more severe than the other support was able to deal with. Let's see. So ERMS counseling is an intensive, individualized intervention that is offered to students who have a mental health concern that is affecting, once again, their education, socially, emotionally, or academically. ERMS counseling is typically offered when social emotional problems are escalating and other support and services, just like I mentioned, that were previously offered have not helped. standard school-based counseling tends to be for students dealing with milder concerns. Typically, the support that's offered for these milder concerns are short-term, and it's often helpful for situation concerns that may not, so some of the other support that Seth was talking about, it might be more appropriate for like a situational type of issue that comes up. So once again, let's take that, for example, a student with an IEP who's been doing great, but they have something comes up like a pet dies and they need some support, but it's not even educationally related. They're still doing fine in school, but they might qualify for some other kind of support out there because it's more of a situational type of concern versus kind of long-term issue that's is coming directly from whatever. It has to be determined that their disability is whatever they're having the disability that is affecting their social, emotional, or academic. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
How long are the services offered for?
What was that?
The services offered for? So
How long? So that's a good question. We usually start out with 12 weeks, and usually it gets extended, but it's a way for an ERMS provider ends up being part of the IEP team, and so what's the 12 weeks is up, and if it's determined that the service that needs to continue, then they would just write it on IEP to extend services. So if the student is still struggling just as much as they were, and so the other thing I should mention is the IEP goals, the social emotional IEP goals are always what we're focusing on in the early services. So if social emotional goals have improved and all the concerns that were coming up have decreased or completely are no longer concerns anymore, then services would end. And that's an IEP team decision if services continue or end.
Yeah, they last as long as the need is there. That's the answer. There is no timeline. There might be a timeline of let's start with 6 weeks and see if it's making any difference, or else we need to try something else. But as long as the need is still there and there's progress being made because of their services, it'll continue until the student has met their goals, just like adaptive physical education, occupational therapy, other providers.
Because I know it was a number of years ago, it was like every 12 weeks or 3 months, it would have to be reassessed. But then, if the social emotional goal hasn't been met, then I would assume that it just keeps on going.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good question. And what was happening before that 12-week protocol was implemented was some students were getting, a year written on their IEP and then a year again, and it wasn't always needed that long, so it would just kind of automatically get renewed every year. So in order to just kind of slow things down and make sure that the student did really, and so there isn't a limit, but it's just a way for the IEP team to make sure that they're continuing to meet and reassess and determine if not only the IEP goals have been met, but do they need to be changed? So kind of slow things down.
Is the provider determined by whether or not the service is on the IEP or not?
So if the service is on the IEP, we use Mary Center. That's it. Yeah. There are, as Nora said, there are situations, I was actually just at one last week, where the student had developed a relationship with the counselor through one of the other agencies. And we had offered it on an IEP for several rounds now, but the student had a great relationship with the person there, so just leave it as is, because that's obviously what we want.
So
the
if it's
student
on
to do.
IEP, it has to be with Mary Center.
It doesn't have to be, but the majority of times it is. Yeah. The only time it doesn't have to be is if the team says, hey, this kid's got a great relationship with the uplift counselor. It's like perfect, same gender, whatever it is.
Obviously, in a relationship that student would have with someone helping them at this capacity, there's a matter of trust. So what are options when we are hearing from our student that relationship isn't working for them? I mean, do we, too bad, so sad?
They would talk to the case manager, and we would do everything that we can, right? Like, there are limitations just with the way that we're funded, there are limitations to what can be done in terms of shifting personnel. You know, we don't allow people to walk in and say, I don't like this teacher, I want somebody else. But we recognize that for education-related mental health services, the relationship is important, so we try to the extent possible to work out. I get some of those across my desk, you know, a few every month, where we try to just work out something to, you know, what we want is what's best for the student. There's just, sometimes we just run into, like, we don't have unlimited funding to like, find the right, you know, iterate through a bunch of different
Or
things.
deep Rolodex of
Yeah.
people that are available to
Right,
help.
right.
That's a good question, and we have, you know, we really try to place our clinicians that are, some personalities work better, their experience or their personality, they work better with high school kids, while others work really well with elementary school kids. So we try to place them accordingly. Some, you know, kind of work across the board. It really depends, but I mean, some of our therapists are, you know, at a high school seeing 15 kids, and there is that part of the therapy process is that whole rapport, and so that does happen sometimes, and parents can certainly talk to the case manager about that. Did you have a question?
No, I was just saying that, yeah, the counselors are assigned to specific schools.
Yeah.
So there'd have to be some kind of.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course,
that's
of
what
course.
we do.
Just like your speech language pathologist, you know, the same thing we talked about. Yeah, so figure out what we can do best. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going through a few questions that I was asked to go over, and then if you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and ask. But the last question that was brought up to me was what are the most common challenges that we're seeing, that our therapists are seeing, and depression and anxiety are big ones. Attention issues is another big one, and then we're not really looking at specific diagnoses. We're really looking at what are the struggles in school, and what are the symptoms. So although it might be depression or anxiety, again, going back to that as an example, since that would be the most common issues we're seeing, we aren't really looking at it as their diagnosis, but the symptoms of depression or anxiety that are coming up in the classroom that are really seen as what's not allowing them to have the educational benefit that they should, then we would be focusing on those, and we would turn that into an IEP goal, first of all, and then we would be focusing on the IEP goal in counseling. And I'd say anger management, communication, social skills, those are some other ones that end up being kind of the big topics that come up in therapy. Any questions? Yeah?
What's the turnover rate for your counseling staff?
Well, let's see, that's a good question. We have some that have been there for years, and we ask for a full school year commitment, so, but we just had somebody that she was moving out of state, there were some changes that weren't expected, so things like that do happen sometimes, but it's hard to say. I mean, I would say the average that they're there for a few years, but we do have some that don't even last like the school year for unexpected events like that, so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like, because I set up the, you know, the paperwork stuff we have to do between us, but it's pretty consistent. There's like a couple each year that change over.
Yeah, but I'd say, for the most part, they stick around for a while.
Any other questions for Jenny? We're running up on time.
Well, it just seems that your therapists seem pretty well experienced with our group of students, and has there been some exchange of some professional development offered to just help teachers that are receiving students in general ed population? Some skill sets maybe to help them work with. That'd be great.
Well, and
Jenny has asked me, has offered.
I
So,
like you.
Yeah, and also, thanks for mentioning that, because I focus so much on the individual counseling piece of this, but our therapists are also expected to be consulting with the teachers and getting feedback from them, giving feedback to the teachers. So this is really a team approach that we're expecting from our therapists, So we do have some teachers that get really involved and they're constantly checking in with the therapist, asking for feedback, bringing up concerns that are coming up in the classroom and asking for feedback on how to deal with some challenging behaviors or the teacher might feel like they're not quite sure how to handle certain things, and the therapist will give consults and feedback there, so.
Do you work with both SDC students and RSP students, or mostly SDC?
The majority, or the whole gamut, right?
Yeah.
I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any
Yeah,
majority,
you know
I think it's
what?
pretty even.
Yeah, you know, our director of school-based services, she actually sent me kind of a breakdown, and I forgot to bring that, but yeah, all across the board, yeah. Anything else?
Great, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to put this back up?
Sure. Oh, wow, you're quick. I was gonna say, if anyone needs a bathroom break or grab some more water,
Yeah.
please do. Does anyone need a minute or? Okay, then I'll continue on. Oh, I'm sorry, let me grab my note from Mr. Wheatley, because we're about to get to that section too. Okay. It is not unusual for a parent first attending our meetings with an individual concern, hoping for us to address it. We found we're unable to properly attend to these individual matters during our meetings, and like I said, it's a privacy issue because we are videoing now our meetings. But we would like to know your concern to address it. I'm willing to stay after if anyone needs to talk one-on-one. Any other CAC members willing to stay after if anyone needs to talk? Yes.
I came in late, did you get a minute?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you guys have?
Are we doing the public comments?
We're about to get to public comment.
Sorry, I got distracted.
That's okay. But I'm glad to see you here, Leo. Leo's our director for our SELPA Director of Special Education Local Plan Area. Did your hand was up? Was that? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And like I said earlier, alternatively, there are purple half sheets on the table if you have an individual situation you wish to get to our attention. And Sue here in the burgundy, hand up. Thank you. We'll take that if you have one to turn in. Okay. We do open our meetings to the public, and we invite anyone to share any comments. Please consider that we are limited to the rest of the hour. We're already a quarter into the hour at least. So try to keep it to about 2 minutes, but does anyone have public comment? Leo?
Kirsten, I missed the minutes, but I was reviewing the minutes from the November meeting. I wasn't in attendance, but I wanted to make some point of clarification on item 5, letter C, that plan on the middle of item C says 30 days to review the plan before it's voted by the school board. That's actually, it should say executive council. It's the plan that was in 2007, not 2006. And it's the next statement to that is there are other aspects of the plan, specifically the annual budget and annual service plan that are reviewed annually. And that presentation of the annual service plan, annual budget plan is a Brown Act meeting and therefore open to the public. Just like to leave that comment. And I wasn't sure what SELPA council meeting on December 18th because there's none in my calendar. And lastly, on the following page that talks about raw notes, letter K. The plan is going to the board. Again, it's going to the SELPA Executive Council board, and it will include the annual budget and service plan. That's set for 3 years, but revised as necessary. And the board, again, the self-executive, is not supposed to vote prior to CAC-SE's review, since I missed the meeting notes.
Okay.
Was there any chance that you could put that into
I'll send it by email right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. Those are important technical clarifications to have, and I appreciate you bringing them to our attention. I wanted to share that there's a screening at Willow Glen Middle School. Their PTA is having a screening of the movie Like. This is from 6 to 8 p.m. on February 10th. It is a documentary about social media and the impact on our lives. I think many of us have read articles about the impact of social media and its connection with depression. I think it's a worthwhile screening to check out if you have the time on February 10th from 6 to 8.
Where is it, the name?
At the Little Theater at Willow Glen Middle School, and that's on Caldwell Road in San Jose.
What's the name?
The movie is called Like. Very Facebook friendly, Tom. Like. So I know you'll like. All right, any other announcements? Any other public comments? All right. Thank you. We're going to move on to announcements and supports. I love beginning with Veronica Lara, who's our family engagement. Are you the director of family engagement? What's the title?
Manager.
You're the manager.
Two announcements. Family University is coming up February 8th. Not this coming Saturday because it's Super Bowl, but the weekend after, so we strategized. We will focus on school transitions, students moving from preschool to kinder, 5th grade to middle school to high school, and then special ed transitions, what are the processes, what's supposed to happen. We will also be having a brief session on vaping, as we know that's a topic that has come up a lot. There is no time to register. There will be childcare. We will have our session will be from 10 to 12:30. Treats in the morning, giveaways to families. There's still time to register, so we welcome you. I also wanted to share another flyer which goes along with the conversation that we've been having on services. We're going to be providing Parent Project, which is a series of 11 to 12 sessions that focuses on topics such as alcohol, drug use, gangs, attendance, lack of attendance. This will be offered in Spanish, but we can certainly have communication with the county office, district attorney's office, so that maybe we can collaborate and send our English-speaking families to that support. They work with the families, we do not work with the students. Students are often in another room. They talk about just different strategies, and they become, like the group that attends these sessions become like a community that serve as a support system to each other. And when the sessions are done, then they usually continue that communication to be a support system to one another.
Can you clarify the commitment that this?
It's an 11 to 12 week session from 6 to 9 in the evening here at the district. It will be offered in Spanish, but I know the county offers these workshops in English for a fee, but they also work with families to see if that can be waived or if it can be decreased. So I know that they work with them. So if anyone has any questions regarding these, they can certainly contact me so that I can also communicate with the county. But the ones that we're going to be offering here at the district will be in Spanish, and there's no fee. Yes.
Can there be English translation?
No, there won't be English translation for these ones.
But she's asking the county if they will do it in English.
Because I know they do offer English workshops there. And Family University is at Hoover. I forgot that minor detail. Hoover Middle School.
And that's on February 8th. Great. circling to transitions, I think many parents have concerns about, am I getting my child ready for adulthood? Has Family University ever considered the transition into adulthood kind of?
That's a conversation that we started with Seth, and that's what we're looking into as to what happens when they leave high school.
Right.
And I know that there's a small number of our students.
I'm not speaking specific to special education. Are you
But,
thinking
you
it's
know, I was thinking
I mean,
special
I
education.
know there is that, and that's something that we're working with, but I think a lot of parents, you know, there's great lists of all the things your child should do and know, right? But just having that really open conversation of how to support your child as they are hopefully growing up and getting out of the house.
That's something we're considering for the last one.
Okay.
The students who are currently applying to colleges or first year students, what challenges did they face once they left the house?
Okay, thank you. All right. Announcements and reports, Seth?
Yeah, just two things. So one is the unglamorous side of public education. Special education is reporting data to the state. So we just, it was over the weekend, Leo was very accommodating, but we had to finalize basically a bunch of information about all of our students, but including students with disabilities, to the state so that they can generate all the statistics that you see on DataQuest and other platforms. And it involves a lot of work for district staff, and so we were busy with that, but we got everything certified and wrapped up where we tell the state, these are all of our students, these are the services. This year was particularly challenging because we transitioned from reporting all this data from the system that houses all of our IEPs to actually reporting it from both our student information system and our IEP management system. People are glazing over, this is so boring. Sorry. But anyway, it's a big challenge because we have to reconcile a lot of information, which we do regularly, but this count that happens, although I'm going to stop calling it that because that's the old language, but we really have to look at students who moved away after a week of school. And like no one told us, and so their IEP is still open because they moved out of California, so no one requested the record. We updated the student information system, but it didn't get trickled down to the person who needed to do that. So just like cleaning up all those things that we catch a lot of times, but there's occasionally students who don't. So we got that out of the way, which is great, and we're adapting to this new world where we're reporting all this information sort of regularly rather than once a year, and so I'm excited to put in place some processes for that. Second update is just that we have a school board meeting this Thursday. I'm going to be doing a presentation, an update on special education. So excited to stay late another night. I'm actually really excited. So come and see.
I have a question about the data. So,
Yeah.
We're actually in the process of running a report just looking at statewide and how the principals are doing. And
Yeah.
we found that there was an error in the data reported that showed that in San Jose Unified, only 2 students were UC-CSU eligible.
Yes.
Which is definitely untrue. I know
Yes.
there are a lot more that are UC-CSU eligible. Do you
Yeah.
have an update on where the data is in that process?
I don't know for sure. We gave the state the right information. It's just not reported correctly. I don't know where it is in terms of correcting it.
Can I follow up with you to see who would be the person to reach out to?
Sure.
To like stay in the loop about that? Because we basically wanna recognize the schools that are doing well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's for all students, right? Yeah. I've heard, people talking in meetings that, like, they need to just look at the files and put the right information.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Why is there such a big gap between the end of the school year and ESY?
Oh, good question. So he's bringing up ESY, which we sent out some information about, extended school year. So certain students with IEPs who may regress over the summer qualify for extended school year. We've traditionally done it in June and over the 4th of July holiday. We decided this year to move it all into July for a couple of reasons. We actually heard a lot of feedback from families that the split over 4th of July was really difficult to plan things. We also lost a ton of kids after the 4th of July split. like half the kids at ES5 just stop coming, which, I understand families have plans, but like that big of a decrease, those students are there because they need it. The other thing is we had a lot of trouble getting staff to commit because of like the way it was aligned. And the third thing is we have to provide transportation services to all of our students during extended school year, including those that attend county programs and non-public schools, and their dates are always in July. So it created a really, like the way we had structured it, created this overlap in the middle of the summer where it was just really difficult for us to get kids everywhere they needed to be with our transportation. So now that we're aligned, we're going to be able to have a much more efficient transportation service during ES5. So those are the three reasons. And yeah, I think providing it uninterrupted without a break is going to be actually really good. The fourth one that, I don't have any, there's not really any, no one's done a study on it, but there's a lot of folks in our system that think that having ESY and then a gap and then coming back to school actually makes it much more difficult on the students because they transition out of the school year, then they transition into ESY, then out of ESY, and then back into the school year. And now it's going to be basically, they transition out of ESY, but there's not much time, and they start in the school year again, so it's hopefully going to be a smoother transition.
So what are the dates for ESY?
July 7th through the 31st. We've told case managers because they're starting to hold IEPs in the spring where we want to make sure they have the information. Mailings will go out to all eligible students though in the next few weeks with an information sheet with everything on it. But
And that
the word is out there.
will be in that.
It won't, no. The explanation for how students qualify for extended school year will be in there. Yeah.
And this would be ESY for both gen ed students who need to.
No, good question. This is only special education extended school year. A lot of our school sites run summer school. I guess they call it ESY now, extended school year for special education students. There are special education students, typically in our resource programs, that would attend the gen ed summer school if they need to, not the ESY. The ESY is the chart we have sort of breaks it down, but there's a test that the ID team uses, but it's typically your students with more severe needs, almost exclusively those in special day classes.
So we can still take our time vacation.
Yes.
I would just urge you as a parent in the community that if you can offer, if you'd still have the ability to insert in the cover letter, that this is we recognize this is a change, but these are the reasons why this change has been made.
Yeah.
I think it's an easier pill to swallow as a parent, but that's one parent.
No, I appreciate it.
Seth, can I ask one question?
Sure.
When what's the report that just came out? The progress towards goals just came out.
Yes.
We got this form with his goals, nothing in progress.
Okay. Your case manager. Yes. We have a quality control mechanism built in, but they're not still through.
Well, I'm thankful that these are going out. This is the
Yes.
first year,
Yes.
so thank you for progress report coming out at the time of grades.
People got them before, it just wasn't systemized like report cards. It was case manager by case manager basis in terms of.
They weren't always as timely, like I would get one in March instead of two for the year, right?
Which is the reason
So,
why,
I appreciate that change,
Yeah.
thank you.
We've got some, it's the first year doing it, so we've got some kinks to work out in the process, but I think
We'd also like to
broadly.
see it each time a progress report is out, because reading a semester to find out your kid's not going to pass is a little bit.
But you do get a progress report on the grades.
Just agree.
Yeah.
But it does show where what we need to address.
Yeah, and you can always ask your case manager. We aligned it with when the report cards go out, because that's actually the letter of the law. And so we said, let's start there. And, figure out, so that's good feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you stole Brian's thunder, because all he was telling me is you've got to let people know that at the board meeting, there's going to be a special education presentation. Huh?
So let's represent.
Yes, so thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the CAC subcommittees, and I apologize that our email got stricken when I transferred this to another format to copy it into this. But if you ever want to reach the CAC-SE, our email is sjusd.cacse@gmail.org. O-R-G. So, sorry, just, our CAC subcommittees? Yes.
Can I do mine?
Oh,
Please skip me.
I apologize, Leo. Yes, please, thank you.
Okay, just an update from the SELPA. I know Seth mentioned the CAC-SE. The past few weeks, the SELPA has been focusing on assisting districts in submitting their CAC-SE. And we work over the weekends with San Jose Unified to finish the CAC-SE submission. So that was a success. We are also waiting, the SELPA is also waiting for the State Department of Education to release information about their compliance monitoring activities for the different districts and charter schools. We have not received official information, but they are looking at targeted monitoring, some intensive monitoring, looking at preschool and significant disproportionality. So as soon as that comes out, I will share that with San Jose Unified and CAC-SE, but as far as I know, that's the information that's coming.
Did I read recently that the new template for the local plan is out?
The template has been posted online. The issue with the template, the local plan template, in case people are asking, Sue was asking about the local plan template. CDE was having a hard time posting something online that is 508 compliant for folks with visual impairment. So, but the content that we were working on in the local plan committee is the same. It's just that we use a Word version of it, because if I pulled CDE's version online during that time we were working on the local plan, it would affect spacing and all that. So, yeah, so the content is the same, it's posted online on the CDE's website.
And do I understand congratulations are?
Yes, I have baby number 3. This January 8th. I am.
You sound so
excited. What?
You sound so enthusiastic.
I sound so enthusiastic because I don't have sleep.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's it for me.
All right. So, subcommittee reports, the education programs were postponed. We were to have, we didn't have our meeting in December. We weren't getting, I was getting enough people notifying me that they would be out of town or not available. December's a tough month. Wasn't getting all the presenters aligned. But our topic is very significant that we missed by not having that meeting. So I'm working with, on organizing that meeting. It will probably be in the library because we want a very open discussion. It won't be the formal, agenda kind of meeting. It's just gonna be the educational aspect of that, and that was autism in the classroom. I think there's a lot of input we wanted in that discussion. And I think to have a space in the library for a couple hours where we could just have that dialogue will be significant, and the information I'm anticipating will be poignant. So I will have that date and that information at our next meeting in February. Okay, legislative subcommittee, Rebecca, did you have anything? I do. Oh, but I didn't bring it. There's Assembly Bill 1914 is by Assemblymember O'Donnell. It's a special education bill on inclusive education, so it's worth reading. It's not perfect, nothing is ever perfect, the first draft through, but it is something to review. And if you have thoughts on it, to write to his office and let them know. And encourage local assembly members. I think Assemblymember Lowe's been pretty active. And even, I think who else? Batese would be good too. He's the one who organizes the free bus ride to Sacramento to advocate for education for all. So that'd be another good person to write to encourage if you wanted language changing or if you just wanted them to support this, just to get that note to them. And what was the bill number? It's a great year. It's 1914. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about local plan and policy review, and we'll have more to talk about at the next meeting because we are to cover what will become a definition of the CAC on the local plan. So I'm looking forward to having that meeting and learning what will be put into that, having that discussion in that meeting, and then we'll bring back to you what that's looking like, so that if there's changes as a committee we need to do, then we'll get that done before things are signed off on it in semi-stone, right, Liam?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Publicity, I'm just wondering by show of hands, how many of you got your automated call this meeting? You didn't get one?
I never
Okay.
get one.
You never get one? All right. So,
Remember the list we have is from like 2015.
yes.
okay,
So we need,
okay.
we need an updated list.
So, Madam Secretary, we could use a, yes, we could use an updated list.
I usually get one and I didn't get one.
You get one?
Yeah, but, so I'm looking, so I know the two of you are more recent than some other members, so it could be a matter of just getting that updated list will fix this issue, but you've gotten calls in the past, right? And you've gotten, never gotten a call. Okay, so when the board approves, you don't input that information, you want us to get that information onto a list and get that to you?
I can give them access to the.
I think this is something to talk about in our meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't wanna use up too much
Yeah,
time,
we can
because I
figure
know
out this
everyone's
later.
getting tired. Okay. So, okay, by show of hands, who's never heard of this committee? You've never heard of it, okay. Ah, a lot of hands. Well, I'm grateful you're here. So I would like to ask, since some of you have not heard of this committee, if you would have suggestions on how we could reach the community to let them know that this kind of organization exists, and because I don't feel like we have enough voices to have a voice. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to share. Yes.
Por medio de boletines en las escuelas, dar la información a los padres de los que tenemos hijos así con esta discapacidad, porque he tenido más hijos y siempre nos decían que nos mandaban la información con los alumnos y nunca nos llegaba nada.
So maybe through bulletins or newsletters from the schools, especially for the parents that have children with disabilities. Sometimes they tell us that they send the documents with the children, but actually we don't receive them.
So I know that we have, many school sites have principal giving a weekly notice. And we've asked, on the dates that they're saying these are dates that are coming up to include us. But if that's not happening at your school site, if you could help us asking that principal to include the community advisory committee meeting dates, that would be helpful. We've asked, but you lead a horse to water. So, but thank you. So newsletters for sure. Thank you. And as far as we have asked for with the procedural safeguards that you are all handed during your IEP, that a copy of our meeting dates be attached to that, and we're finding that that's not consistently happening. So we're working with the district in hopes of that fixed, but that's just another avenue.
I just want to clarify again, because I just want to make sure it's true, what I'm saying is true. Procedural safeguards are available through our IEP management system. I have no control over what those procedural safeguards look like, it's from the state. I've provided a copy to our case managers electronically that has the CAC-SE agenda. However, many of our staff just download it right from there, or they have printouts from years ago in their office that they just hand to me. So it's there, it's just a question of people accessing it.
Could you please continue to remind them?
It's in every newsletter, so it's there. It's linked on our main sort of resources page. I just want to clarify, it's not an unwillingness, it's just that we have 200 case managers, getting them all to comply with something like that that's not quote unquote mandatory. It's just difficult, and I understand the reasons why, right? A lot of them have a cardboard box of procedural safeguards they just hand out.
So if we provided them with a small stack of our plan for the year, at the beginning of the year, is that a better chance of it getting attached to the procedural safeguard?
They might, yeah, they might.
Okay.
They might. Yeah, for those who have it already printed out.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yo pienso que como a la escuela del niño, así se da la información a los niños que no están en educación especial y para nosotros con niños con discapacidad es muy limitada la información que nos dan a nosotros como para estas juntas. Y sí estaría bien como que nos hicieran una llamada, como dice usted, electrónica o algo, para que nosotros también estemos enterados de todo esto que está pasando, porque en realidad no sabemos nada de esto.
It's very important for us to receive this kind of information, especially this community, for example. So in my child's school, unfortunately, the parents receive general information, but not the parents that have children with disabilities is different. So we will really appreciate a call, a phone call, like you said, or some kind of email or some reminder for us to come to these meetings.
If you've signed in with your information, and you've included your email on the, and the phone number? Oh, yeah, the phone number. Well, the phone number is only, okay. We'll ask them to start calling people that are members that have given us their phone number. But with the emails, I kind of lump it in and I blind copy, I didn't do this month, but I usually blind copy everyone that there's a meeting coming up with that information. And then after I've written that, sometimes I will do this. I will copy it and it'll be Google Translate because it's sometimes quick to turn over, so you won't get the best representation, but you'll get something to reread, and I think you can read between the lines on our intentions if Google Translate fails me. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so our last meeting, we were asked at the end of last year to work on a mission statement. I have, can you help me pass these around? I have some copies of our mission statements. We narrowed it down to a couple members taking it on, some drafts and notes that we talked about. It's in English on one side and that lovely Google Translate on the back side. So I wanted us to, so these are 3 suggestions by CAC members. I would like to narrow it down to the favorite of the 3. So we're going to take about 10 minutes. I'm going to ask you to choose one person to be a speaker at your table. Everyone weigh in on what their favorite is, and if the person who's in charge could tally. And then, if as a table, you could focus on 1 or 2 of them, if you would want to edit a little bit, and then we'll make note of any changes. Okay? Yes, sir.
What is that? Tally 2 for A1?
No, that's an example. Like oh, there's two of us really liked it, and one of us liked C. That was an example. I'm glad you asked. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, don't make your palms our problem, dude. Play drum battle, buddy. The other guy too, like, you're disrespecting this thing. It's like, it's just an education. We'll have like an agenda. Instead of just coming here and listen, get feedback, learn some stuff. It's like that one other gal that just comes in here all combative. I don't know her name. I don't know her name. Yeah, that's. There's like sometimes certain organizations have the wrong intentions. Suppose they do their job. He was on happy to go like the first 6 months he does the position and then like,
But hold on.
It's hard to revise when we don't take any of your advice. It's the same shit.
Advocating and advising for the budget. I mean, you're like mission words at that point. So, yeah, we don't have the power to make any decisions. That was instruction. And we will go over it. We'll see how they go. Because right now, they say these are responsibilities that are limited to.
Well, I've just realized we're really close to 8 o'clock, and I'm wishing I could sit at every table, because I'm imagining some really good conversations going on. So I just wanted to, so what we're gonna do with these, is I'd like to hear from each table which A, B, or C was tallying the most. And then I'd like to collect them, hopefully if you had edits, you wrote it on the paper, because we will do a final version of our mission statement to present for next CEC meeting, but I would like that information to be considered. So I sat at this table, and I know it was a tally of 3 for C. So can we
Tally for 3 for C over here.
3 for C there, okay.
Sí.
Unanimous, okay.
A nosotros nos llamó la atención la propuesta A, y nosotros nada más le agregaríamos un poco de la C, donde viene que dice todos los estudiantes a través de un enfoque inclusivo y equitativo mediante apoyo y aprendizaje. Eso se lo agregaríamos a la propuesta A.
So for us, it could be a combination from A and C.
Okay.
We like A, but with some wording from C, especially about the inclusion.
I think
Here.
And
Wonderful.
maybe with the concrete.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, so if, I guess we'll, Sue, can you collect all those? Okay. Thank you so much, because I didn't want it to be one voice, but I love having, yes,
Once you finalize, I can have legal review.
legal review.
That's an offer. That way we want to make sure it's consistent, because I see, I want to make sure, like, talking about it's clear.
Okay.
You're talking about what, inclusive and equitable approach, what does that mean? To make sure that it's clear and not open to interpretation.
For clarity, okay. Good, okay, thank you, Leo, appreciate that. All right, well, believe it or not, we're already at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to conclude our meeting. I want you all to know our next meeting is February 24th. There will be a district presentation on support and discipline. We'll have a little update by then on the local plan. And then the dates for autism in the classroom. And I know the legislative subcommittee is trying to get a coffee set to talk about the legislative process and how parents can further advocate at a state level. Because we certainly can make impact at that level. All right, so I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm hoping that we'll see everyone and more at the next meeting on the 24th. Don't forget to vote. Oh, and don't forget to vote on the 3rd, please. Please vote. Primaries are just as important. It's support and discipline.
Oh, I see it.
Thank you.
No, hesitate. I know.
I know, ours two are like, ours are like, no, continue
No, yeah, it's on, it's on. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so there might be. Yeah, yeah. You are at 46, yeah. Yeah. It is only a few hours a day, so the possibility is low. But it does. Yeah, there's not much of it. Yeah, because
Okay, I'll give her a card.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the one that. That's what you are. Yeah.
On the night of me. I would definitely say the night of me. I can't just run.
Really?
But I would stay with you.
Okay.
Maybe I go by then. The guy I'm more nervous for him.
Yeah.
And I think I can track. I know my guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised by that. Yeah. Very promising.
Really tired.
But
I've done nothing for. Let me talk to Leo.
Thank you so much.
I understand.
Thank you.
But not me.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
All right, good to see you. Yeah, take care.